The rain came down in sheets, a relentless curtain of water that blurred the world into shades of gray. Ethan Harper gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up pickup, the wipers struggling to keep up. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, sat in the back seat, humming softly to herself, her small hands clutching a tattered stuffed bunny. It was just the two of them, as it had been for years, navigating life's storms, literal and otherwise. Ethan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching Lily's reflection. Her wide, trusting eyes were a lifeline, the reason he kept going despite the weight of unpaid bills, a grueling factory job, and the ache of a heart still mending from loss. Tonight, they were driving home from Lily's school play, where she'd shone as a tiny sunflower in a sea of cardboard props. The memory of her beaming smile kept Ethan grounded, even as the road ahead vanished into the downpour. Then, out of nowhere, a flash of red taillights swerved wildly in the distance. A sleek black car skidded off the road, its rear end fishtailing before it plunged into the swollen ditch beside the highway. Ethan's heart lurched. Instinct kicked in. He pulled over, his truck rattling as it came to a stop. "Stay here, Lily," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "Daddy's gonna help someone. Is it safe?" Lily's voice trembled, her bunny hugged tighter. "I'll be okay, sweetheart. Just stay put." Ethan forced a reassuring smile before stepping into the rain. The ditch was a churning mess of mud and water. The car half submerged, its front end crumpled against a tree. Ethan's boots sank into the muck as he approached, the cold biting through his thin jacket. Through the cracked driver's window, he saw a man slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. The man's suit was pristine despite the chaos, a stark contrast to Ethan's worn flannel and faded jeans. "Hey, can you hear me?" Ethan shouted, banging on the window. The man stirred, groaning. Alive. That was enough for now. The door was jammed, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a rock from the embankment and smashed the window, ignoring the glass that nicked his hands. Reaching in, he unbuckled the man's seatbelt and dragged him out, careful to support his head. The stranger was heavier than he looked, his frame lean but solid. Ethan half carried, half dragged him to the safety of the road, laying him on the gravel shoulder. The man's eyes fluttered open, dazed but alert. Who are you?" he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "Doesn't matter," Ethan said, checking for other injuries. "Can you move? Anything broken?" The man shook his head weakly, wincing. "I don't think so." Ethan glanced back at his truck, where Lily's small face pressed against the window, watching with wide eyes. The rain was worsening and the ditch was filling fast. He needed to get this guy to safety and get Lily home. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called 911. Good. Help was coming. "Stay here," Ethan told the man. "Help's on the way." The stranger grabbed Ethan's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Wait, your name. Tell me your name." Ethan hesitated. Something about the man's intensity unsettled him, but he brushed it off. "Ethan," he said simply, then pulled free and jogged back to his truck. "Daddy, is he okay?" Lily asked as Ethan slid into the driver's seat, soaked to the bone. "He'll be fine, kiddo," Ethan said, starting the engine. He glanced at the stranger one last time, now sitting up, staring after them as the first responders arrived. Ethan didn't wait. He drove off, the rain swallowing the scene behind him. The next morning, Ethan woke to the usual chaos of their small apartment. Cereal spilled on the counter, Lily's mismatched socks scattered on the floor, and a stack of bills glaring at him from the kitchen table. He hadn't thought much about the crash after getting Lily to bed. It was just something you did. Help. Someone in trouble. No need for fanfare. But as he poured Lily's orange juice, his phone buzzed with a local news alert. "Billionaire tech mogul survives crash on Route 17, the headline read. Ethan's brow furrowed. He clicked the article, scanning it quickly. Julian Voss, 38, CEO of Voss Technologies, was rescued from a near-fatal car accident last night by an unidentified Good Samaritan. A photo showed the man from the ditch, his sharp features unmistakable even through the blood and rain. Ethan set the phone down, his stomach twisting. A billionaire. He'd pulled a billionaire out of a wrecked car. The article mentioned Voss's empire, AI startups, renewable energy patents, a fortune that could buy half the state. Ethan shook his head, pushing the thought away. It didn't change anything. He had to get Lily to school and himself to the factory by 7 a.m. But the story didn't end there. Julian Voss sat in his hospital bed, a bandage on his forehead and a fire in his chest. The crash had shaken him, not just physically but existentially. He'd built a life of control. Algorithms, investments, calculated risks. Yet last night, he'd been helpless, at the mercy of a stranger who hadn't even stuck around for a handshake. Ethan. That was the only name he had, but it was enough. Julian wasn't used to being in anyone's debt. His assistant, Clara, stood by his bedside, scrolling through her tablet. "The police have no record of the guy," she said. "No one saw his license plate, and he didn't talk to the paramedics. It's like he vanished." "Find him," Julian said, his voice low but firm. "I don't care what it takes." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" He clearly didn't want to be found. "He saved my life," Julian snapped. "I need to know who he is." Clara nodded, already typing. Julian leaned back, his mind racing. He wasn't just grateful, he was obsessed. Who was this man who risked his life in a storm, then walked away without a word? In Julian's world, people always wanted something: money, influence, a favor. Ethan's silence was a puzzle, and Julian Voss didn't leave puzzles unsolved. Weeks passed, and Ethan's life trudged on. The factory was laying off workers, and his hours were cut. The bills piled higher, and Lily's school sent a notice about unpaid tuition. Ethan hid the worst from her, keeping their evenings filled with stories and laughter, but the stress gnawed at him. He hadn't told anyone about the crash, not even his sister Mia, who lived across town and checked in when she could. One evening, as Ethan helped Lily with her math homework, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find a woman in a sharp blazer holding a tablet. "Ethan Harper?" she asked. "Yeah," Ethan said warily. "Who's this?" "Clara Nguyen, assistant to Julian Voss. May I come in?" Ethan's heart sank. He stepped aside, gesturing to the cramped living room. Lily peeked from the kitchen table, curious. "Go finish your homework, sweetie," Ethan said, and she obeyed, though her eyes lingered. Clara didn't sit. "Mr. Voss wants to meet you. He's been looking for you since the accident." "I didn't do it for a reward," Ethan said, crossing his arms. "He's alive. That's enough." "It's not about a reward," Clara said, her tone softening. "He just wants to thank you. In person." Ethan shook his head. "I've got enough on my plate. Tell him I'm glad he's okay, but I don't need a meeting." Clara studied him, then nodded. "I'll pass that along. But—" She hesitated, glancing around the modest apartment. "He's not the kind of man who takes no for an answer." After she left, Ethan sat heavily on the couch, rubbing his temples. He didn't want to be dragged into some rich guy's world. He just wanted to keep Lily safe, fed, and happy. But the encounter left him uneasy, like a storm was brewing just out of sight. Julian didn't take no for an answer. A week later, a letter arrived. Not a bill for once, but a sleek envelope with the Voss Technologies logo. Inside was an invitation to a gala in the city, with a handwritten note. "Ethan, I owe you my life. Please, let me thank you properly. Bring your daughter. Julian Voss." Lily found the invitation before Ethan could hide it. "Daddy, are we going to a fancy party?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. Ethan sighed. He didn't trust Julian's motives, but Lily's excitement was hard to resist. Maybe one night wouldn't hurt. "All right, kiddo," he said. "But just this once." The gala was a world Ethan didn't belong in. Crystal chandeliers, tuxedos, and champagne flutes. Lily, in a thrift store dress Mia had spruced up, clung to Ethan's hand, awestruck. Julian found them within minutes, his presence commanding, despite the bandage still on his forehead. "Ethan," Julian said, extending a hand, "you're a hard man to track down." Ethan shook his hand, cautious. "Didn't mean to make it a chase." Julian's smile was warm but calculating. "This is Lily, I presume?" He crouched to her level, charming her instantly with a story about his own childhood dog. Ethan watched, torn between gratitude and suspicion. As the night wore on, Julian pulled Ethan aside. "I want to help you," he said bluntly. "I know you're struggling. I've done some digging." Ethan bristled. "You had no right—" "I know," Julian interrupted, raising a hand. "But I don't forget debts. Let me help with Lily's school, your rent, whatever you need." "I don't take handouts," Ethan said, his voice tight. "It's not a handout," Julian countered. "It's a thank you. You saved my life. Let me save yours." Ethan wanted to refuse, to walk away like he had that night on the road, but Lily's laughter echoed from across the room, where she was dancing with Mia. He thought of the bills, the layoffs, the constant weight on his shoulders. For once, he didn't want to fight alone. "All right," Ethan said finally, "but on my terms." Julian nodded, a spark of respect in his eyes. "Deal." Over the next months, Julian kept his word. He paid off Lily's tuition and covered the apartment's back rent, but only after Ethan insisted on working for it, consulting on a community project for Voss Technologies, using his factory experience to streamline operations. It wasn't charity, it was partnership. But the real change wasn't financial. Julian, once a solitary figure obsessed with control, found himself drawn to Ethan's quiet strength and Lily's infectious joy. He started visiting their apartment, not as a billionaire but as a friend, sharing pizza and board games. Ethan, wary at first, saw the loneliness behind Julian's polished exterior, a man who'd built an empire but lost touch with what mattered. One night, as Lily slept and the two men sat on the balcony with cheap beers, Julian spoke softly. "I've spent my life chasing success, Ethan. But you've got something real. Lily, a home, purpose." Ethan looked at him, the city lights glinting below. "You could have that too, you know. It's not about money." Julian smiled, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm starting to see that." Years later, Ethan stood at Lily's high school graduation, Julian beside him. They'd built something unexpected, a friendship that bridged worlds, grounded in a single act of selfless courage. Ethan never asked for recognition, and Julian never stopped giving it, in ways that mattered: time, trust, and second chances. The story of that rainy night faded from the headlines, but it lived on in the lives it changed. Ethan, the single dad who saved a billionaire, didn't need a spotlight. His legacy was Lily's smile, Julian's redemption, and the quiet truth that heroes don't always stay for the applause. They just keep moving forward, one storm at a time. Inspiring message: true heroism isn't in the act itself, but in the choice to keep going, to lift others up, even when no one's watching. We all have the power to change a life. Sometimes it starts with saving one.